Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into the fascinating story of a brilliant mind who literally changed how we think about making the most of what we have. We're talking about Leonid Kantorovich, a name you might not know, but whose ideas touch almost every part of our modern world, from how products get to your doorstep to how entire economies function. Get ready to have your mind blown by how mathematics can solve real-world problems. So, imagine an economy, any economy. What's it all about? Choosing the best ways to use limited resources, right? Kantorovich, way back in the day, saw this not just as a market problem or a government problem, but as a math problem. He didn't start with political systems, he started with equations. He basically said, what if we could turn all our production and allocation decisions into a system of linear relationships? And from that simple yet revolutionary idea, he forged a whole new field, linear programming. This wasn't just some abstract theory, it came with its own language, things like feasible sets, objective functions, shadow prices, and duality. These terms might sound complex, but they're incredibly powerful tools. Long before we had global supply chains and just-in-time logistics, Kantorovich was already arguing that clear constraints and reliable ways to value things, no matter who sets those values, are the absolute bedrock of efficiency. This one idea reshaped both centrally planned and market economies, and it's why he won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1975, sharing it with Leonid Kantorovich for their massive contributions to the optimal allocation of resources. Pretty cool, right? Now, let's rewind a bit and set the stage for this incredible journey. Leonid Kantorovich was born in 1912 in Petrograd, right in the middle of a Russia that was completely transformed by revolution and industrial chaos. He was an absolute mathematical prodigy, the kind of kid who starts university in his mid-teens and becomes an assistant professor, while most of his peers are still just starting their undergraduate degrees. Around him, the entire country was being rebuilt through ambitious 5-year plans, all focused on rapid industrialization. The planners desperately needed numbers: what to produce, where to ship it, how to allocate scarce timber, coal, and labor. And guess what? This intense, practical demand for calculable guidance met a mind perfectly trained in functional analysis and optimization. It was a perfect storm of need and genius. Fast forward to World War II. As Soviet factories were being relocated and railways became literal lifelines, Kantorovich was right there, working on practical allocation problems. He learned firsthand that production choices aren't just about ideology, they're fundamentally constrained by time, by capacity, and by transport. After the war, he split his career between Leningrad and the new scientific centers emerging in Siberia, building teams dedicated to applying pure mathematics to the nitty-gritty details of industry. In a closed economy with limited imports and constant bottlenecks, the question, what's the best feasible plan, wasn't just academic. It was the difference between widespread shortages and genuine sufficiency for millions of people. His work had direct, tangible impact on everyday life. Now, Kantorovich wasn't working in a vacuum, though his specific approach was unique. His intellectual world was a fascinating cross-section of mathematics, economics, and the very dawn of the computer age. In the Soviet Union, he collaborated with brilliant functional analysts and applied mathematicians, and with industrial economists who were all searching for a quantitative language to make planning more effective. But here's where it gets really interesting. Around the world, several other brilliant minds were independently grappling with similar problems. Leonid Kantorovich, his Nobel co-recipient, was developing what he called activity analysis, which basically represented technologies as linear combinations of basic activities. Then there was George Dantzig, who devised the simplex method, a groundbreaking algorithm that suddenly made it possible to solve huge linear problems computationally. John von Neumann, another titan, connected optimization with game theory and fixed-point results, explaining why these dual values, the prices, in an optimization model, actually carry deep economic meaning. And Wassily Leontief's input-output analysis gave planners a matrix-based map of how different industries relied on each other. So, Kantorovich wasn't a lone inventor. He was a central figure in a global network of thinkers who were transforming resource allocation into a solvable science. At the core of Kantorovich's groundbreaking insight was the idea of casting production as a linear program. Think about it. You want to maximize your output or minimize your cost, but you have limits, constraints on capacities, available materials, labor hours, transport limits. His formalism turns a big, vague question, like, how do we run a factory efficiently, into a precise mathematical problem with a clear, feasible set of possible actions, an objective function to optimize, and a solution whose optimality can actually be tested. Because the constraints and the objective are laid out explicitly, the model is transparent, auditable, and adjustable. Need to change a capacity, adjust a coefficient, set a new target, the consequences are immediately clear. It's like having a crystal ball for your production line. And this leads us to one of his most powerful concepts, shadow prices and duality. Every linear program has a dual problem, and its variables are these incredible things called shadow prices. What do? They measure exactly how much your objective, say your profit, would improve if you could relax a specific constraint by just 1 unit. Kantorovich called them objectively determined valuations. They're not market prices in the traditional sense. Instead, they're internal valuations directly implied by your technology and your scarcity. Whether you're in a planned economy or a market economy, shadow prices instantly reveal where expanding would yield the greatest gain and which binding constraint desperately needs investment. They also provide a consistent logical rule. Produce until the value of an extra unit equals its shadow cost, and ship goods along routes where the shadow value exceeds their opportunity cost. It's a blueprint for efficiency. He also tackled a special case of linear programming, one you might recognize, the transportation problem. This asks how to move a commodity from multiple origins to multiple destinations at the minimum possible cost. Kantorovich analyzed this problem deeply, laying foundations for what we now call optimal transport. The math here links economics to probability and geometry, and later even gave rise to what modern data science knows as the Wasserstein distance. In practical industrial terms, it provided clarity on how to schedule shipments, correctly size inventories, and ruthlessly eliminate wasteful routes. Imagine the impact this had on getting goods where they needed to be, when they needed to be there. Kantorovich firmly believed that mathematical optimization could make central planning incredibly efficient. But he was also a realist. He knew that optimization models are only as good as the data you feed them. If technologies are mismeasured, if crucial constraints are missed, or if targets are politically imposed without considering the actual trade-offs, then even the most optimal model can utterly fail in practice. This tension fueled intense debates within the Soviet system. These shadow prices looked suspiciously like market analogies in a society that was deeply suspicious of markets. Yet ignoring such valuations meant tragically wasting scarce resources. Outside the Soviet Union, similar questions were being explored, just in a different language. How much information do markets truly aggregate compared to centralized ministries? How do local knowledge and individual incentives interact with centralized algorithms? And what happens when the real world is messy, non-linear, uncertain, or involves indivisible decisions? Linear programming truly exploded in usefulness as algorithms improved and computers matured. The simplex method, decomposition techniques, and later, interior point methods continuously pushed the boundaries of how large and complex a problem could be solved. Kantorovich belonged to the first generation to truly grasp how computers could transform economic analysis from a conceptual exercise into an operational, practical tool. He passionately advocated for building a strong mathematical culture within industry, empowering engineers and managers to formulate their own models and accurately interpret the resulting prices and shadow costs. He wasn't just creating theory, he was creating a practical toolkit for progress. Of course, no pioneering work goes without its critiques and limits. One primary criticism targets the assumption of linearity. In the real world, technologies often aren't perfectly linear. They have thresholds, indivisibilities, and sometimes increasing returns to scale. Think about setting up a factory. There's a big upfront cost, not just a smoothly increasing one. Another big criticism focuses on information and incentives. A model can prescribe an efficient allocation on paper, but if the people involved have private information or weak incentives, implementation can easily falter. And a third concern involves dynamics and uncertainty. Linear programs are generally static snapshots of a moment in time, whereas real-world investment and learning require dynamic, intertemporal models that account for changes over time. But here's the thing. Kantorovich himself was keenly aware of these limitations. He saw linear programming not as the ultimate ceiling of economic analysis, but as a foundational starting point, a place to begin applying discipline, fostering dialogue, and building more sophisticated models. His work laid the groundwork for countless innovations that followed, continuing to influence fields from logistics and finance to operations research and artificial intelligence today. So, the next time you see a delivery truck, or marvel at how a complex factory operates, or even think about how resources are managed anywhere in the world, remember Leonid Kantorovich. His mathematical genius didn't just earn him a Nobel Prize. It gave us powerful tools to make better decisions, allocate resources more efficiently, and ultimately build a more productive world. What an incredible legacy, right? Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the world of optimization economics. If you found this as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button, share this video with a friend who loves history or math, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive. Your support truly helps this channel grow. See you next time.